Welcome to the Explainer. Today, we're opening up something I like to call the Woden Files. Now, we've all heard the stories, the epic poems, the booming thunder of Norse mythology. And right at the center of it all sits Odin, the All-Father, the one-eyed god of wisdom, war, and magic. For centuries, across countless generations, he's been worshipped strictly as a deity. But what if we've been reading the history books completely wrong? What if this mythological lens is actually obscuring the real truth of our past? So here's the big question. Could the All-Father of mythology actually be a flesh-and-blood historical figure? Are we looking at a literal god, or just the distorted, multi-generational memory of a terrestrial king? Today, we're going to take a fascinating historical theory and actually test it against hard scientific data pulled straight from the earth. Let's dive in.
Part 1, The Man Behind the Myth, Reopening a 2,000-Year-Old Mystery.
In his book, The Quest for the Historical Odin, author Christopher T. Knight proposes this absolutely bold framework that fundamentally challenges the boundaries between mythology and historical fact. His core premise explores the possibility that Odin wasn't just a myth spun around a campfire. Instead, the theory suggests he was a real, living leader, a man whose arrival, conquests, and ultimate legacy sparked migrations and shaped entire nations, eventually echoing down through the millennia as the legend we know today. Knight literally calls it, quote, a bold new theory that challenges everything we thought we knew. And honestly, the stakes here are absolutely massive. If Odin was the terrestrial king who actually walked the earth, we kind of have to rethink how legends are born. We aren't just analyzing folklore anymore. We're literally tracking a ghost through human history. Part 2. The Migration Age Matters. When war and movement reshaped Europe. Okay, so if a flesh and blood Odin really existed, we'd need a specific chronological era where this kind of massive upheaval could actually happen. And the strongest historical window for this is the migration period. This was a dark, chaotic time of war, mass movement, and rapidly shifting borders all across the continent. It was exactly the kind of volatile environment where a powerful leader could carve out a massive territory, upend the existing power structures, and literally completely reshape Northern Europe. So Knight's theory rests heavily on the arrival of what we can call new elites entering Northern Europe during this migration age. But here is the really beautiful thing about history. If a powerful new leader and a whole host of his elite followers really did migrate into Scandinavia and take over, there is no way they could do it invisibly. They would have lived, breathed, died, and most importantly, they would have left behind physical evidence in the ground. Part 3. Digging into ancient DNA. Shifting from mythology to microbiology. To really test this theory, we're going to look at a 2010 genetic study from the University of Copenhagen. Because, amazingly, it turns out the All-Father of Norse mythology isn't just made of magic and ravens, but actual traceable DNA. The researchers extracted mitochondrial DNA, or mtDNA, which is passed down exclusively from mothers to their children. And since it survives incredibly well over long periods of time, scientists basically use it as a biological time machine to trace ancient human ancestry and map out these massive migration patterns. Now, the sheer scope of what they studied is, frankly, staggering. They analyzed remains stretching all the way from the Mesolithic period, so roughly 7,000 years ago, through the Neolithic, into the Iron Age, right through the Viking Age, and all the way into the Medieval Age around AD 1450. They were effectively mapping the complete genetic evolution of Northern Europe over 7 entire millennia. They pulled their clues from 18 different ancient burial locations scattered across Denmark. And as you can imagine, the success rate in extracting DNA varied widely. Some Bronze Age bones were heavily handled over the years, making contamination a huge issue. But others, like the remains at the Galgadadal Viking site, were virtually untouched since the day they were buried 1,000 years ago, giving these scientists incredibly pristine genetic data to work with. Part 4. A sudden genetic shift. The data reveals a massive migratory event. So, as the researchers mapped these ancient lineages out over time, they found a really startling anomaly hiding right there in the bones of ancient Danes. But to fully grasp it, you kind of need to know about haplogroups. Think of a haplogroup as a distinct genetic signature. It's essentially a way for scientists to group populations of people who share a common ancient ancestor. It tells us exactly which global family tree a specific skeleton actually belonged to. And here's the big reveal. In ancient Danes dating from the Iron Age through to the Viking Age, they found a massive 13% frequency of a specific genetic signature, haplogroup I. Out of nowhere, it suddenly appeared in a huge portion of the ancient population they sampled during this exact time frame. Now, you might be wondering, why is 13% so shocking? Well, let's compare it to today. In modern, living Scandinavians, haplogroup I sits at a mere 2.5%. This sudden, massive spike in the ancient world, followed by a really drastic drop-off, is a scientific smoking gun. It strongly points to a massive influx of a totally new population entering the region during the Migration and Iron Ages.
But wait, it actually gets even more specific than that. At an Iron Age settlement site called Simonsborg, scientists identified another huge clue, the T2b anomaly. And why does this matter? Well, because that specific genetic motif is almost exclusively found in Eastern European populations today. So, the hard science proves that people from the East were moving into Scandinavia during this exact historical window, which is right around the time Odin supposedly arrived.
Part 5, Myths Rooted in Science, where mythology matches microbiology.
So, what exactly happens when rigorous, hard microbiology perfectly backs up a wild historical theory? Well, these Eastern European haplogroups spiking in Iron Age Denmark perfectly represent the arrival of Knight's new elites. We are quite literally seeing physical evidence of a massive influx of warriors and leaders from the East written right into the marrow of 2,000-year-old bones.
Let's put these two timelines side by side for a second. On one side, we have Knight's theory, new elites arriving from afar, reshaping the North during the Migration Age, and creating a legacy so profound it birthed the myth of Odin. On the other side, we have the Copenhagen University study, a sudden, undeniable influx of foreign DNA from the East appearing at that exact same time in history. The supposed historical impossibility of the myth just vanishes completely when DNA from a 2,000-year-old tooth proves this massive migration actually happened.
Now, you're probably asking, if it was at 13% back then, why did it drop to just 2.5% today? Well, the researchers note that this specific genetic signature was likely, quote, diluted by later immigration events. Think about it. These ancient Eastern elites arrived, they conquered, they ruled, and eventually over the centuries, their bloodlines were just absorbed and diluted into the wider population. All that was left of their world-shaking arrival were the exaggerated legends of magical gods ruling from Asgard. So, if the ancient DNA proves that this massive Migration Age arrival was totally real, validating the theory that a real terrestrial leader could have inspired the myth of Odin, what else are we wrong about? Seriously, which other gods in our pantheons might just be the ghosts of our forgotten history, quietly buried beneath our feet, just waiting for the science to catch up?